We have had that conversation about her policy views, but how does her changing her views on her policy justify having the Republican nominee questioning her race? Does that increase or decrease your party's chances of winning in November?
Well, Kaitlan, you haven't had that conversation with Kamala Harris because she's been hiding out.
I want to have this conversation with you, Senator.
Just like Joe Biden hid out before her. And my point is, when are you and the rest of the media going to demand that Kamala Harris come out and answer questions in an unscripted format about where she stands for this country, as opposed to continuing to focus on what Donald Trump said today? 4 years ago, Joe Biden said, if you don't vote for him, you ain't black. Could you imagine a more insulting comment? Joe Biden is presuming to judge the political views of 1/8 of our fellow citizens based on their skin color. Did you ever ask Kamala Harris to condemn his remarks?
There are
Did you ever
33.
ask him or ask her if that was racist?
This is a question. You're a Republican senator, so I want to ask you about the Republican nominee.
Did you ask Kamala Harris? Kaitlan, did you ask Kamala Harris why she's willing to serve as vice president for a man she essentially called racist and a segregationist? Have you or anyone else in the media asked Kamala Harris those questions, Kaitlan?
All right, guys. So we got to react to this interview between Kaitlan Collins on CNN and Senator Tom Cotton from Arkansas, who is going to refuse to bend the knee, to essentially call the former president of the United States, Donald Trump, racist because he questioned Kamala Harris's blackness. Now, again, remember, these are the same people who supported Joe Biden for president, who told Charlemagne the God, a black man, that, hey, if you don't vote for me, you ain't black. Or if you don't know whether or not you want to vote for Trump or me, then you ain't black. Okay? This is the same media that is now pretending as if Kamala Harris did not call Joe Biden a racist on a debate stage just a few years ago when she was running in the primary against him. And for whatever reason, the media is now boohoo, whining, and crying. They're upset about the comments that Trump made, even though they seem to not be very concerned about Democrats questioning the ethnicity or the race of voters who don't support them. And that is a point that Tom Cotton is going to bring up in his interview with Kaitlan Collins, who's going to press him time and time again to condemn Trump's comments, and he's going to refuse to do so. And the reason why I'm reacting to this video is because I think this is a prime example of how Republicans should respond to the questions from the media by going on offense, Do not accept the left in their terms for how they want to frame the conversation. Go on offense. And that's exactly what Tom Cotton is going to do here in this interview, as he's going to continuously turn around the questions on Kaitlan Collins and ask, why is it that you guys don't ask Kamala Harris questions at all? But for whatever reason, you guys are so obsessed with Trump, but you don't want to talk about policy. And because all you want to talk about is race and identity politics, this is how we got here, right? You got what you wanted, and then you boohoo, whining, and crying about it. So, yeah, I mean, that begs the question of why haven't you actually been talking about what we should be talking about? Which, again, is the point that Tom Cotton is going to make here, and I want to go ahead and react to it. So without further ado, let's get into it.
I'm joined tonight by Republican Senator Tom Cotton of Arkansas. And Senator, it's great to have you here. As I noted a second ago, you worked alongside Vice President Harris when she was in the Senate. Donald Trump is standing by his comments tonight. In your view, are those comments defensible, Senator?
Kaitlan, of course. First off, it's refreshing to see a presidential candidate who's willing to go in front of the media, something that Donald Trump knew would be a tough interview. It turned out to be a hostile, adversarial interview, but he's been doing that for 9 years. Kamala Harris, meanwhile, has been hiding out for the 10 days that she's been a presidential nominee. Before then, she used to do interviews every 5 days or so, but now she hasn't faced any media at all. I guess she thinks she can hide out for 100 days until this election. More fundamentally, the issue isn't what race Kamala Harris identifies as. It's the fact that she identifies as a San Francisco liberal. She has a long record, not just as vice president, of being Joe Biden's border czar, standing by the disastrous Afghanistan withdrawal, but running for president herself. She said she was going to take away your health insurance on the job, while she was going to give health insurance to illegal aliens, and that we'd have a lot more of them because she promised that she would decriminalize illegal immigration. She cast the deciding votes as vice president in the Senate for the trillions of dollars of spending that has unleashed inflation on families that make it harder for them to make ends meet. Kamala Harris is a dangerous San Francisco liberal, and that's what really matters to Americans.
Yeah, I didn't hear Donald Trump bring up any of her policy positions today or stances when he was on that stage, but
Wow. Again, listen to this clown, right? Listen to this clown on CNN. It's so funny how she says it, because just factually, that's not true if you watch the interview.
They're coming in, they're invading. It's an invasion of millions of people, probably 15, 16, 17 million people. I have a feeling it's much more than that. And everybody's been seeing what's happened. The first group of people, the black population, is affected most by that. And Kamala is allowing it to happen. She's the border czar. She's the worst border czar in the history of the world. There's never been a border czar like this. She's never even essentially been. She said she was there once, but not the right part of the border. So she was a border czar. She's done a horrible job. These people are coming into our country, and they're taking black jobs and Hispanic jobs. And frankly, they're taking union jobs. Unions are being very badly affected.
But furthermore, Trump was not really asked any real policy questions outside of qualified immunity, right? They wanted to talk about J.D. Vance. They wanted to talk about January 6th. They wanted to talk about DEI. They wanted to talk about everything except policy. I think Trump is the one that kept trying to turn the conversation back into a conversation about the border, about, actual, issues that's going on in the country, right? He tried to talk about that. But again, these journalists were not interested in trying to have a policy discussion at all outside of a bunch of stuff that, in my opinion, is just not that big of a deal, okay? And I'm going to keep it 100 with you. The qualified immunity thing, I mean, that's a waste of time. It is. Police reform is not a top 10 issue in this country. Any time wasted talking about that issue is just dumb, in my opinion, right? But this is what they want to talk about. So, again, it's not Trump's fault that they didn't have the type of policy conversation that Kaitlan Collins pretends that she's looking for. The journalists weren't interested in having a real policy discussion where they compare and contrast the policies of the Trump administration versus Kamala Harris. They didn't want to do that. That's the last thing they wanted to do.
your argument is that just because she hasn't done an interview since she became the top of the ticket, that it's okay to question what her race is?
Well, Kaitlan, if you didn't hear Donald Trump talking about her positions and his record, then you didn't watch the interview. It went on for more than 30 minutes.
I did watch the interview,
The vast majority of it was Donald Trump talking. The vast majority of it, Kaitlan, was Donald Trump talking about his record, contrasting it to the Biden-Harris record of higher inflation and wide open borders and war and chaos around the world, and pointing out that she has said things like she wants to eliminate the immigration police, and that she believes that illegal immigration should be decriminalized, and she wants to confiscate private firearms. These are all indisputable things on her record, Kaitlan. There's videotape of them. Have you shown that videotape in the last 10 days since she became the presidential nominee for the Democratic Party?
Senator, we have.
When she promises to rip away health insurance?
We have talked about her past positions.
Bullshit. You haven't talked about her past positions. You've been talking about whether or not Kamala Harris is brat. This is what you've been talking about, right? You've been talking about how she's the best thing since sliced bread and how historic this is and all the momentum that she has in her campaign. You haven't talked about any of her policies or her radical far-left positions. You haven't done that at all. The only people that have been talking about that on your network are Republican contributors and commentators that you guys bring on that bring it up in conversation, but the overarching conversation really is not about policy. It's all about a bunch of bullshit to try to make it seem like Kamala Harris is the best thing ever, and you don't actually want to have the policy conversation. In fact, the mainstream liberal media, to me, is doing a disservice to journalism by not actually having these conversations, these policy conversations that we should be having for a candidate that nobody voted for, right? Nobody voted for Kamala Harris. And you would think that an unbiased, fair, balanced media would say, hey, you know what? We got to make sure that the voters are educated about what this woman actually believes. She said some pretty wild things in 2019 that you can argue resulted in her dropping out of the primary before a vote was cast. Maybe we should let voters know that, hey, this woman believes all these things. You sure that you want to vote for her? You sure this is who you want? But no. spend more time, again, focus on identity politics, J.D. Vance and the things that he says, Trump, all the other stuff. They don't focus on her policy position. So what Tom Cotton is doing here is exactly what every Republican should be doing when they're asked this question, because they will be asked this question. Why are we not talking about Kamala and her policy positions? Okay, notice how when she asked if Trump's comments are defensible, Tom Cotton says, of course they're defensible, right? He's not backing away from it. He's not boohoo, whining, crying. He's not doing any of that. He's standing on it. He's like, well, that's what he said. So, again, when we're going to talk about Kamala Harris's policies, right? Why are you guys not focused on the things in the interview that actually really affect the outcome of people's lives? Why are you not focused on that? Again, this is how it's done. This is a good job.
And the reversals of those, and we've delved into all of that because that's actually what voters care about. But when your party's nominee is on stage telling a panel of 3 black women that the first black woman to serve as vice president hasn't always identified as black, how does that help your party win elections?
Well, the reason why it helps us win elections is because it shows that we're fed up with the nonsense and that we're willing to say the truth, even if people don't like the truth, which will gain you respect. Because there are a lot of people out there, including black folks, that don't think that Kamala is black. And the fact that Trump was willing to say that out loud on stage in a room full of black people, again, a lot of people looked at that. They may say, hey, I might not like it. But this man has cojones of steel, because it does take cojones of steel for a white man to go into the lion's den like that and to tell these black women journalists to their faces exactly what he thinks. And I don't think it would have been different if there was a man on stage and Roland Martin was asking him the question. It don't matter who was asking him the questions. It would not have been different. It would have been the same thing, okay? So, yeah, the reason why it helps is because people might not like it, but they respect it. They see that and they say, okay, that's strength. That's a guy that can lead the country. That's a guy that can stand toe-to-toe with Putin, can stand toe-to-toe with Xi Jinping. That's a guy that's not going to take any shit from our enemies. That's how it helps.
Well, Donald Trump said that what matters is that she identifies as a dangerous San Francisco liberal. It's not what race she identifies as, but what she identifies
focused on race in that comment,
what's going to make a difference.
Well, the question was a race-based question. So I'm not entirely sure how else is he supposed to answer the question if you actually want him to answer it. Because, again, if he doesn't answer the question, what is the headline going to be? Well, Trump dodges when asked about Kamala being a DEI hire. So, again, it's damn if you do, damn if you don't. If you pivot the policy, they're going to say you're racist because you didn't answer the question. I mean, again, this is what I'm talking about. It's damned if you do, damned if you don't. So you might as well stand on what you say, stand on the truth, and be proud of it. Don't play defense, play offense.
Kaitlan, the interview was more than 30 minutes long, which is 30 minutes longer than Kamala Harris has had an interview with anyone since she became the presidential nominee.
Fact.
The vast majority of the interview was talking about Kamala Harris's dangerous record on our wide open border, on higher taxes, on taking away health insurance on the job and giving health insurance to illegal aliens. The vast majority of that interview was contrasting the Biden-Harris record and Harris's record from the first time she ran for president to the Trump-era record. That's a contrast that Donald Trump will win every day of the week.
I know you don't like her policies, and you talk about, you call her the San Francisco liberal. I saw you saying that with Jake Tapper the other day, but that was not Donald Trump's main point today when he was asked about your Republican colleagues on the Hill who refer to her as a DEI hire. He was asked if he believes that she's only on the ticket because she's a black woman. And then he said that she doesn't always claim to be black, which is not true. But does anything that she has or hasn't said about her heritage have anything to do with her qualifications to be in the Oval Office?
That's a damn good question. That's a damn good question, Kaitlan Collins. Please ask yourself that question the next time CNN is celebrating Kamala Harris for being brat. Please ask that question next time CNN is praising Kamala Harris for being a so-called woman of color. Or in their case, when they did a whole profile of Kamala Harris in which they talked about her being an Indian, right? They didn't really talk about her being black, but apparently she has identified as black all her life. Apparently CNN didn't know that in 2019, 2020, okay, when they did this profile of her. But again, I would love to see CNN ask these questions next time a Democrat talks about how we need to put somebody in a position of power because of their skin color, their race, right? When a Democrat says that, hey, I'm going to pick a black woman and make them a Supreme Court justice, CNN should ask that question. Well, what about skin color, race makes them more or less qualified than anybody else? But they'll never do that. They will never do that to a Democrat. They'll never do that. But again, she'll ask this question to a Republican after Trump says, well, I don't know if Kamala's black. Now all of a sudden, oh, well, what does race have to do with Kamala Harris's qualifications for being president? Well, you should be asking Joe Biden that question. Joe Biden literally said he picked Kamala Harris because she's a part of the diversity, equity, and inclusion agenda, because she's a so-called black woman. Again, it's amazing how that works. All of a sudden, CNN understands that, identity politics, race doesn't really have that much to do with qualifications when it comes to this, but they never realize it when it comes to Democrats openly stating that, yeah, we're picking people based off race and sex and whether or not they like their genitalia. Amazing.
Well, no, Kaitlan, that's not what President Trump said. He said he didn't even know what Rachel Scott meant by a DEI hire, and he had no idea why Joe Biden hired her. What really matters is whether the American people want to hire her, given her record. And I promise you, if you think things have been bad for the last 4 years under Joe Biden, the worst is yet to come if Kamala Harris is the president.
I just want to quote his words to you, Senator. He said, I didn't know she was black until a number of years ago when she happened to turn black, and now she wants to be known as black. So I don't know, is she Indian or is she black? You can defend those comments tonight?
And he also said either is fine, both is fine. He loves African Americans, he loves Indian Americans, he loves all Americans. The point is that we don't know where she stands politically because she spent her entire life as a dangerous San Francisco liberal, and now in the last 10 days she's tried to flip-flop on every single position. Well, I should say she hasn't tried to flip-flop because she's sending out anonymous campaign aides to say that she no longer holds views that she held when she ran for president in her own right. When is she going to come on Kaitlan Collins' show or Jake Tapper's show or go on 60 Minutes or have an unscripted press conference and answer to the American people where she stands on the issues that matter to them, on whether or not they can pay the bills on July 31st at the end of the month, whether or not they're going to be able to pay them next month, whether or not we're going to have another 10 million illegal aliens in our country under a Kamala Harris presidency.
Facts. And again, this is the conversation that we should be having, but we can't because the media is obsessed with wanting to talk about everything except policy. The only time that CNN ever talks about Kamala Harris's policy is when they're trying to change the history of what she stood for, right? That's the only time they talk about it. When they lie about it, that's it. But again, the question is, why isn't Kamala Harris doing any tough interviews? Why is she not going on Fox News? Why is she not going on Newsmax? Why is she not going on News Nation? Why is she not going on any of these outlets that are not propaganda arms for the Democrat Party? I don't know. Fox News, they might be nowadays, but I'm not entirely sure. I'm just saying that in general, Kamala doesn't do any interviews that are going to be hostile towards her. Why is she not actually speaking about her positions? Why is she not answering questions about these old positions that she has that we have on tape? And again, this is a person that nobody voted for, but the media doesn't think that it's important to actually sit down and to get an interview with her to answer these questions. It's fascinating. Their priorities are out of line.
Have had that conversation about her policy views, but how does her changing her views on her policy justify having the Republican nominee questioning her race? Does that increase or decrease your party's chances of winning in November? Because
just like she'll change her race, right? She'll change her policies in order to fit what she needs at the time, right? That's why it's relevant.
Well, Kaitlan, you haven't had that conversation with Kamala Harris because she's been hiding out.
I want to have this conversation with you, Senator.
Just like Joe Biden hid out before her. And my point is, when are you and the rest of the media going to demand that Kamala Harris come out and answer questions in an unscripted format about where she stands for this country, as opposed to continuing to focus on what Donald Trump said today? 4 years ago, Joe Biden said, if you don't vote for him, you ain't black.
Fact.
Could you imagine a more insulting comment? Joe Biden is presuming to judge the political views of 1/8 of our fellow citizens based on their skin color. Did you ever ask Kamala Harris to condemn his remarks?
There are
Did you ever ask him Or ask her if that was racist?
This is a question. You're a Republican senator, so I want to ask you about the Republican
Did you ask Kaitlan? Did you ask Kamala Harris? Caitlin, did you ask Kamala Harris why she's willing to serve as vice president for a man she essentially called racist and a segregationist? Have you or anyone else in the media asked Kamala Harris those questions, Caitlin?
Senator, trust me, I covered the Biden-Harris White House. We obviously have asked for her to come on, but my question is for you about this. Donald Trump's pick for VP once questioned whether he was America's Hitler. But Senator, before you go...
Yeah, so that was a great job from Tom Cotton. It really was, because that line of question about why the media didn't give a damn about Joe Biden, telling Charlamagne the God, if you don't vote for me, you ain't black. I think that's a good rebuttal, right? That's a great rebuttal to ask the media. You turn the questions back around on them. They love asking questions. But you really should ask the question of, again, if you guys are so concerned about this, if you're so offended by this, why weren't you offended by Joe Biden's comments towards a black man questioning his race because of his voting preferences, or Kamala Harris deciding to be the vice president for a man that she essentially accused of racism in a way that personally impacted her? She also said that she believes the Me Too allegations against Joe Biden, but they don't ever want to have that conversation. The only conversation they want to talk about is what J.D. Vance said about Trump years and years and years ago. But they don't want to talk about what Kamala Harris said about Joe Biden in the primary and then turn around just a few months later and decided that, hey, I'm going to be VP. This guy's amazing, right? He's going to solve racism. It's amazing how that works. So, hey, shout out to Tom Cotton. This is a great interview. I think that Republicans should use this as a template for how to handle the questions from the media, because they will be asking about this for the next week. So, hey, they already have a good template for how to deal with this. Just always bring it back to policy and ask them, well, why are they not talking to Kamala Harris, right? Why do you guys not want to talk about Kamala Harris and her policies? Why do you continue to deflect from the real conversation that we should be having? So let me know what you guys think. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. Most importantly, share a Black conservative perspective. Peace.